I just tell the truth, and telling the truth is crazy in a world full of lies. If you mix brilliance with bravery, that we can ignite something. Even this conversation alone can ignite the people.
The time is now to express and for people to believe in themselves. The time is now for it to be okay to be great. People in this world shun people for being great, for being a bright color, for standing out. But the time is now to be okay to be the greatest you.
Hey guys, what's up? It's your girl Kelly, and we are back with another video. Thank you so much for clicking on this video and checking out the channel. And if you're new, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button, guys. If you're into true crime stories, news, and political commentary, I think that you would enjoy, and I would greatly appreciate it. Anything you can do to interact with the channel, like the video, give us a comment. It really does help me out a lot. And if you're not new, thank you guys so much for being a friend as always. I very much appreciate each and every last one of you guys as well. And let's get into it. Today, guys, we're going to be talking about this pretty famous story that I remember as a child growing up. It scared the shit out of me, quite frankly. I was about the same age as Elizabeth Smart when she was actually abducted from her home. And this was a story that resonated with me throughout all of my years as a child. It's kind of like another JonBenet Ramsey type of story where, you know, you see these people that, you know, you can relate to them. They might remind you of your family, and something horrible like this happens to them, and it just kind of resonates with you. So this is a story that I always remembered. I remember whenever, you know, her book came out, and I was like obsessed with this story growing up. So I wanted to come on here and talk to you guys about it. Have you guys heard of this story? It's, like I said, it's pretty well known, but I wanted to come on here and kind of refresh it, give it some new life. Of course, always honor Elizabeth Smart and what she went through. She's a very strong young woman, and, you know, much respect to everything that she has gone through in her life, because I could not imagine being abducted by these two freaks you see in the middle of the screen here, guys. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into the story of Elizabeth Smart.
Good morning, everyone. It's 7:27, and we have a major story breaking at this hour. A 14-year-old girl kidnapped from her home by an intruder during the night in the Federal Heights area.
Elizabeth, if you're out there, we're doing everything we possibly can to help you. We love you. We want you to come home safely to us.
Elizabeth was an angelic little girl who'd been kidnapped, and she really was. She was this innocent, bright-eyed, you know, obedient girl who played the harp. She became a symbol of, I think, innocence and a victim.
She doesn't do anything to anyone, and there's no reason that you should have her. Please let her go, please.
Elizabeth Smart was a child that grew up in Salt Lake City with her mother and father, Ed and Lois Smart. She was one of 5 siblings. They were a Mormon family who lived a relatively quiet and regular American life. That is until the morning of June 5th, 2002, when everything would change forever. This all started back whenever her mother actually initially met this man, who would later be known as Brian David Mitchell, on the streets of Salt Lake City when she was out with her 2 daughters shopping, and she encountered a man who was out on the streets preaching. And he was, you know, a vagrant person. He was just someone who was out there living on the streets, and she took pity on him. She gave him money, and eventually, after speaking with this man, would go on to later hire him to come and do some roofing work for them and their family. Out of the kindness of her heart, she wanted to help this man. They were a good, like I said, Mormon Christian family, and they did not see the potential harm that might come from something like this. They did not think that this man who was preaching the word of God would have ill intentions on their family. But that is so tragically what has actually transpired. So in November of 2001, she meets this man. And then in June of 2002, June 5th to be exact, he would creep into their backyard and he would find an open window in the kitchen of their home. And with this, he would cut the screen of the window and make his way inside. Now, he later came and said that he took this as a sign from God, the open window, and nobody there to stop him from entering the home, as a sign that he was meant to do this, that Elizabeth was meant to be his. So he sneaks into the house and sneaks up into the bedroom where Elizabeth was sharing a bed with her younger sister, Mary Catherine, who was 9 years old at the time. Elizabeth was 14. And she is awoken by a man standing over her at 2 a.m. with a knife to her neck. This man tells her to be quiet and to get out of bed immediately, and if she made any sort of sound that he would cut her throat and he would kill the rest of her family. So, terrified, Elizabeth complied, and she was pulled out of bed by this strange man who had entered her home, not knowing whether or not he had already killed the rest of her family, not knowing whether or not he was going to kill her or what he would actually do to her. And her little sister heard the entire thing. She was sleeping next to her in the bed and was paralyzed by fear at the thought of this man taking her sister right from their bed that they were sharing. So he leads her into the closet, makes her grab shoes, and then leads her out into the hallway of the house, where he leads her down the stairs, and finally out of the back door, where they would disappear into the woods. Now, her younger sister, who had heard and witnessed the entire event, was not able to actually build up the courage to go into the room of her parents for quite some time. She was obviously terrified. She did not know if they were still there, if this was a trap, if he was laying in wait for her as well. But eventually she did alert her parents, and they would go to investigate and find the slit in the screen of the kitchen window and immediately notify the police. Now, at this time, Brian David Mitchell had already led Elizabeth out into the woods behind the home. They had made their way through that woods up until the mountains that were about a few miles away from her home. And upon walking through these woods, they came to a road where Brian David Mitchell actually pushed Elizabeth down when he saw a pair of headlights coming. So she was terrified and paralyzed with fear, and she would later go on to say that this was actually a police car that had rode right past them. And this was the first of many chances where she would encounter police, and was completely and utterly failed at the opportunity to be saved before this man would actually get to do what it was that he wanted to do. So they made their way through these woods behind her house up into the mountains, and they trekked several miles from where he had initially taken her from her home until they reached a makeshift campground where they were greeted by a woman. And Elizabeth recalls saying that this woman embraced her in an aggressive and forceful hug. And this woman who was ordering Elizabeth to do all of these different things, it would later turn out that this woman's name was Wanda Barzee, and she was Brian David Mitchell's wife, who helped every step of the way with this kidnapping. She was not there whenever he actually took her from her home, but she was completely informed on what was going to happen, and she helped to facilitate Elizabeth's imprisonment for the next 9 months. So Smart recalls that she was begging and crying and just was so scared. I remember thinking, I know what comes after a wedding, and that cannot happen to me. That cannot happen. Only a few hours earlier, she had been at home in her bed. Now Mitchell had her trapped. I remember him forcing me onto the ground and fighting the whole way, she said. And then when he was finished, he stood up and I was left alone, feeling absolutely broken, absolutely shattered. I was broken beyond repair. I was going to be thrown away. And being forced to have this wedding ceremony and being forced to have sex with this disgusting man. She was then chained up to a tree and forced to live in this makeshift campsite where there was this hole in the ground, as you can see from these photos, and for better or for worse, living in the dirt amongst bugs and leaves, and there was no water or food or any sort of amenities that Elizabeth had become accustomed to, living with her family who took very good care of her and who loved and cherished her. So the torture that she endured was completely and utterly mental, physical, and emotional. He not only manipulated her with his forceful actions and his violent behavior, but with his words, by using what he had done against her, telling her that she was never going to be wanted by another man after he had his way with her, and that her family didn't love her anymore, they didn't care for her, they weren't looking for her, which she later found out and came to know was a lie, when only a few days into being forced to be housed at this makeshift campground, she actually heard voices in the mountains where she was being held captive, and they were calling out for her. She later recalled that this was the voice of her uncle, who she recognized, and she was completely and utterly silenced by the threat from Brian David Mitchell that anyone who attempted to rescue her and enter their campground would be killed by him, and that he would also kill her as well. So she stayed silent, did not call out to the people who were calling out for her, and the search efforts eventually in those mountain woods were suspended, and they stopped looking for her there, which eventually led to even more thoughts from Elizabeth and threats from Brian David that no one was looking for her and that she was to just give up her hope for being rescued. So they were living there for several months in these mountain woods, in a tent, in the dirt, in this little hole in the ground, with very little food, very little water, no way to clean herself or take care of herself. And as the winter was approaching in September of 2002, Brian David Mitchell declared that they were going to be taking a bus to California to get prepared for the colder weather. So that is exactly what happened. They took a bus to San Diego, where they would go on to live for the entirety of the winter. And this really brought a lot of despair to Elizabeth, where she thought it was going to be hopeless. The rescue efforts to find her and to eventually get back to her family were going to be tarnished by leaving Utah and going to this new state of California where no one knew her. No one was looking for her there. So she was very much afraid that she was going to have to submit to this lifestyle and to this life that she was being forced into. And she was very much afraid that she would never see her family ever again. So they moved to San Diego area for the winter, where they stayed through September into February of 2003. And they had many struggles in San Diego. Elizabeth recalls that there were many fights between the two of them. And at this time, he had actually allowed her to become unchained. So she had proven herself to be someone who was going to comply to what he said. So he gave her more and more freedom. He actually would bring her out to go on errands into the town, where she would not try to escape. She would not try to yell for help. Again, there was many encounters where she would actually come into contact with the police. And there was one in particular where she was in the library with the two of them. A police officer approached them and wanted to question Elizabeth. But Brian David Mitchell actually used his faith and claimed to be a Muslim. And that is why he explained that the two ladies were wearing face coverings, and used basically the discrimination that some Muslims had felt at that time after 9/11 as a scapegoat for the police officer, and shrugging off his concerns of whether or not this may or may not have been Elizabeth. And at that time, she did not call out to that police officer. She did not try to signal to him. And so Brian David Mitchell felt like he could trust her. So he was bringing her to parties. He was bringing her to stores. He was allowing her to be unchained at the campground. And this was a form of hope for Elizabeth, because she felt that if she just waited and was patient, she would eventually be able to get back to her family, and the most important thing for her was to stay alive. So in February of 2003, Elizabeth, actually learning from her captors and learning from Brian David Mitchell himself, actually proposed the idea of hitchhiking back to Salt Lake City. And she posed this to him as a way of basically planting the idea in his head and asking for him to make the ultimate decision, and saying that she knew that God would direct him because he was the Messiah, or he was their connection to the Almighty, which he eventually agreed to bring them all back to Salt Lake City. And so in February, they hitchhiked back and eventually made it all the way there. And this is where the story would take a drastic turn. So in March of 2003, March 12th, 2003, Elizabeth was finally rescued from her captors. She was with the two of them in Sandy, Utah. They were out shopping, having just arrived back to the Salt Lake City area. And a woman actually recognized Brian David Mitchell from a sketch that was released because her sister had seen and heard this man and was eventually able to give a description of the man who had done roofing work on her house many months prior. And this woman recognized him and called the police. The police approached the three of them on the streets of Sandy, Utah, asked her if she was Elizabeth Smart, which at first she denied. And then after some prying and getting her away from the two captors that had been holding her for the last 9 months, raping her, emotionally abusing her, physically abusing her, traumatizing her. Once she was away from the two of them, she finally admitted, yes, I am Elizabeth Smart, and she was rescued, and the two of them were arrested. So I want to show you guys now a bit of the video of the police officers who talked about that day that they found Elizabeth Smart. So let's get into that.
That we wanted, the truth, until almost 45 minutes had passed.
Wow. And one of you basically said, "Are you Elizabeth Smart?"
Yes, we did. At the point that we realized who it was, we asked her, we said, "Are you Elizabeth Smart?" And she was reluctant. She was very scared, very nervous, and understandably so. She was a 14-year-old girl that was being controlled and dominated. But she looked at both of us and said, "If thou sayest." And we're like, "What did you say?" And she said, "If thou sayest." And, and kind of gave nonverbal cues and shaking her head that, yeah, that's who I am. And you could see she was very relieved at that point.
This was just prior to her going in the car, because we were taking her down to the office, and we said, just for your family's sake, for your sake, just tell us who you are. And I've never heard those words before personally.
Right.
And I think I looked at Bill and the other officer, another officer, Officer Rasmussen that was there, and it's like, we'll take that as a yes.
Right. And I know you guys have talked about this before, and I've heard it before, but even hearing it now, I have chills. I mean, what was it like when you realized you have found this girl who's been missing, who so many people were concerned was dead?
I think, and maybe I can speak for everybody for a moment, we were there to do our job.
So truly incredible, guys. I mean, it is so very rare that you will find a child who had been abducted for months. 9 months, Elizabeth Smart was abducted and held hostage by these two evil and sadistic people who were claiming to be doing the work of God. And she was found alive and well. For the most part, she had been damaged, yes, traumatized, yes, but she was still completely unharmed, for the most part, as it would be physically. She was still alive. She had her life, and she now had her freedom. So I want to show you guys next the interview that she did with Meredith Vieira, where she actually took her to the site where these two monsters were holding her captive for all of those months, just miles from her home in the woods of Salt Lake City, Utah. So let's get into that one.
For leading her into a remote camp and then a tent. What happened next would shatter a young girl's innocent world. Oh my gosh. This is it?
This is it.
What was here when you got here?
Right where we're standing, there were tarps laid out on the ground, and then right here would have been where the tent was set up.
What was this place? Elizabeth's first chilling clue came from behind the trees.
And out of this area walked a woman. She had on long linen robes.
Then the strange woman led her into a tent, ordering her to undress.
I was begging and crying and just so scared.
Elizabeth knew something awful was about to happen. I said, does this give you the creeps just being back here? And she said, you know, it doesn't. I'm totally comfortable here because this place didn't hurt me.
So just imagine this scene right here. Being led up here whenever you're a 14-year-old girl, just having been stolen from your home, and you have to face this reality of being in the woods with two strange people who you didn't know and who were completely terrifying as people. I mean, look at this man. He had this long beard, long hair, dirty demeanor. This woman who was later described by Elizabeth as being an evil and just completely unhappy and vicious woman. So I could not imagine. It is a story, like I said, that in a way traumatized me, because it perpetuated a reality that most people would always claim that was so far-fetched. You know, like, this just doesn't happen. You don't find that a stranger just breaks into your home and kidnaps you. Well, with Elizabeth Smart, it did happen. And somebody like me who was around the same age as her, it was terrifying. It was a terrifying thought to think that you could, be taken in such a way and be made to endure the fate that Elizabeth was actually made to endure. So let's get into a little bit of Brian David Mitchell's interrogation with the police here, just so y'all can see what kind of freak show we are dealing with.
Those questions or answers that you're seeking about anything other than who I am now.
Okay. This girl that was with you, what did you call her?
Her name is Shirjesha.
How do you spell that?
S-H-E-R-E-A-R.
S-H-E-R.
S-H-E-A-R. Shir. Jash. Jashub is J-A-S-H-U-B.
J-S-H-U-B.
Shirjesha.
How old is she?
Once again, that question
is very relevant. How old is she?
She's 18.
What would lead you to believe she's 18?
Because the Lord has said she is such.
The Lord God Almighty told you that she's 18 years old? That's a yes or no question?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Did you marry her?
But you say 18. You say 18.
Ryan,
I'm not. That's not who I am.
Emmanuel, listen. Did you marry her?
I didn't marry her, but she's still to me as my wife. Yeah.
She's still to you as your wife. Have you had sexual intercourse with her?
Those are very personal, private questions.
That's a very relevant question. Did you have sex with her? Yes or no?
You told me I have an attorney present. I am my attorney.
You were your own attorney?
Presently, I am.
Okay.
Presently, I am. I'm defending myself, am I not? These
Yes,
questions
you are.
can be used against me, correct?
That's correct. They can be.
Okay.
To tie a millstone around his neck and jump in the lake and drown himself.
And that's why
rather than harm one hair on
And that's
your
why
head.
I feel so sorry for all of you that are doing this to Shirjesha. That's right.
No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what we do
What
here.
you're doing to her. What you're doing to her.
I really struck a nerve there, didn't I?
What you're doing to her. What you're doing to
That was
her.
right on the button. You have harmed a girl. You have harmed a child. You have gone against Jesus Christ's written orders.
You're harming her.
No. You didn't have sex. Brought her home to her family. You took a girl and you harmed her.
I saw her with
in
her dad.
direct
Guess what?
contradiction to Scripture.
I don't dabble what she was crying.
Why would she be crying? She must be, somewhat distraught after the past 9 months of living with you.
Jesus Christ.
Having had sex with you. I mean, how often do you shower?
Oh, gross.
You've done a horrible thing. And you're justifying it in your own mind by saying the Holy Spirit did it.
What the two of you are doing.
The Scriptures say that you have sinned.
What you are doing is sin. What you are
You
doing
have
is
sinned a great sin.
I have been obedient unto God.
You have
Almighty.
sinned.
God
And
told you
God
to have sex.
against the
I have been
commandments.
He has been obedient unto God. Just utter blasphemy. This is demonic. This is the devil's work. Truly evil lurks among us every single day. And people like this are proof. People like this who use God as a shield to perpetuate evil are some of the worst and most depraved kind of people. And these are the ones in society that people should fear and should really never underestimate these kinds of people. And this goes on, obviously, for a good 2 hours, where he tries to gaslight these detectives who are questioning him, lies about the age of Elizabeth, basically lies about her compliance. He is in full-blown denial mode. He is in full-blown CYA mode. He is in full-blown blasphemy mode. I mean, he's evil. He's evil. So let's listen to a couple more minutes of this, and then I want to show you guys some of her testimony, or just we can hear a bit of that. It wasn't obviously televised, but there's some reporting that was done about the trial, and then we'll wrap it up, guys.
Obedient to God Almighty.
God told you to have sex with her?
You have sinned.
You're trying to put words in my mouth.
Did God tell you to have sex with her?
Your accusations against
That's a simple question. Yes or no? Did God tell you to have sex with her?
I told you your accusations against
I'm not accusing you. I'm asking you a question.
Your accusations are false.
It's a question. Did God tell you to have sex with her?
Your questions are false.
Did God tell you to have sex with her?
Your questions are false.
Is she the only child that God's ever told you to have sex with?
Your questions are immaterial.
If someone
no sense.
Then give me an answer. Yes or no?
Because I never said God told me to do any such thing. And he never did.
Oh, wait a minute.
God never told you to have sex with her.
God told you to take her as your wife. He told us that just a little while
Exactly.
ago.
And that's all I told you.
So you decided to have sex with her.
I told you
Don't face the law.
I told you that I was obedient unto the Lord God.
And look at us when you talk to
in
us.
receiving her.
Why are you shutting your eyes when you talk to us?
I told you that I was obedient unto the Lord God Almighty in receiving her.
Okay.
As my wife.
So God didn't tell you to have sex with her. He told you to receive her as her wife, as your wife.
That's all I told you.
Okay. So then you took it upon yourself to have sex with her.
Your accusations are false.
I'm asking.
Your accusations
Okay.
So you've never had sex with her?
Your accusations are false. In what you're accusing me of, there's no truth.
So you have not had sex
in
with
your
her?
words, in what you're accusing me of, there's no truth.
No, you're just so full of shit. You can't even look me in the eye when you talk to me. Look me in the eye like a man when you tell me your lies, okay?
You're not looking at him.
You're not looking at me. Did you have sex with Esther, yes or no, as your wife, that God said was okay to do? Did you or did you not? Yes or no?
How are you determining?
Look me in the eye.
Don't answer like Bill Clinton. Answer the question. Did you have sex with her?
You can't even look me in the eye.
Now you're look up here. Give one of us eye contact and answer the question.
Why should I submit to your control of me?
Well, you know what? Because Elizabeth had to submit to your control for 9 months.
Why should I submit to your accusations?
Why should Elizabeth submit to your control?
In your eyes are your accusations.
Why should Elizabeth submit to your
your contempt,
why should Elizabeth submit to your control?
Your ridicule, your condemnation.
Why? You're damn right we condemn guys who have sex with 15-year-old girls.
I'm supposed to look in your eyes and receive that hate, that condemnation. You know I've been looking into both of your eyes.
No, you haven't.
I have.
Oh, now when you're telling me, now you are. Okay, so let me ask you this.
Why should I submit to your control and look in your eyes when you do?
Why should Elizabeth submit to your control? Why should Elizabeth submit to your control? You want to talk about control? Why should Elizabeth submit to your control? Why should she leave her house?
I never controlled her.
Did you never have sex with Esther, yes or no?
What was your name again?
Hearts.
Hearts.
Did you have sex with Elizabeth, yes or no?
All I have done has been out of obedience to the Lord God Almighty.
So did you have sex with her, yes or no?
According to your question, no. I did not.
You did not?
According to your question, no. What an utter depraved piece of shit, okay? I mean, just... I couldn't imagine. I could not imagine being Elizabeth and going through this, having to deal with this person, and then knowing that he was not having any remorse whatsoever for what he had done, not in any way taking any responsibility, being sorry for putting her through this. He's a disgusting individual. So let's get into some of the testimony that Elizabeth gave after this occurred. In 2005, he was actually, they were both found to be incompetent to stand trial. So they did evade justice for quite some time, but eventually they were put on trial. Elizabeth was able to testify against these two individuals, and they were sentenced, both of them, to prison time, although Wanda Barzee was let out after about 10 years in prison. She ended up being sentenced, I believe, to a 15-year sentence and was let out early and is out currently living amongst us in the streets. So, yeah, that just goes to show you what kind of justice was given for Elizabeth in regards to Wanda Barzee. Now, yes, Brian David Mitchell was sentenced to life in prison, but it still does not really, in my opinion, deliver true justice for what it was that she had to go through. Her innocence that was lost. You know, her virginity that was stolen from her. Her childhood years that were stolen from her. It's disgusting and it's depraved, and the woman that she is today is truly awe-inspiring, because having to go through what it was that she went through and being the person that she is today, I couldn't imagine it. So
the 14-year-old girl who was kidnapped in her bedroom at knife point the first weeks of her captivity. Her accused kidnapper, Brian David Mitchell, was not allowed in the courtroom today because he was singing hymns during the proceedings. His defense is predicated on insanity. In a composed voice, she told the jury about what happened the night of June 4th, 2002. I remember him saying, "I have a knife to your neck. Don't make a sound. Get out of bed and come with me, or I will kill you and your family." Her 9-year-old sister, Mary Catherine, shared a room and witnessed the abduction.
I was very shocked and I was so scared. I just ran back in my bed and hopped underneath my covers.
Elizabeth says she was marched 3 miles to a canyon where Mitchell and accomplice Wanda Barzee made her his wife, staging an impromptu wedding. In today's testimony, she says she was raped on a daily basis, if not more. He forced me off the bucket and into the bed that they had, where he proceeded to fight me to the ground and forced the robes off, where he raped me. She says she cried herself to sleep that night. When she woke up, there was a cable around her ankle that was tethered to a nearby tree. She remained bound for about a month and a half. There was one particular moment Elizabeth recalls fighting back. I bit him. I bit his tongue as he was trying to kiss me, and I bit him. He pulled back and said if I ever did that again, he would never have sex with me again, and I'd be the most miserable woman in the world. Meanwhile, there was a massive nationwide search. Smart told the jury today that she was aware of the rescue efforts. I remember one day sitting on the buckets with the defendant and his wife. I remember hearing my name being called out, and I remember him becoming very, very tense. And I remember him telling me if I cried out, he would duct tape my mouth shut, and anybody who came into the camp would be killed.
When my case finally came to trial, about 8 years after I was rescued, I felt as I stood up on that stand and as I gave my testimony, it was just question after question after question. I mean, it was just, felt like facts on a sheet of paper. It didn't feel like it was real. It didn't feel like it was really my story.
Next, we turn to the latest on the Elizabeth Smart kidnapping.
I wanted to say, you heard the facts, but you don't understand what it was like. You have no idea. I have a knife at your neck. Don't make a sound. Get up and come with me.
This 14-year-old girl is at the center of a mystery and an intense search.
I wasn't just raped. I was chained up. I was starved. I was denied water. I was denied food.
Elizabeth Smart smiled today in court when that guilty verdict was read. This is the moment she...
I was pretty nervous going into court, but I remember when I did see him and he was shackled, I realized that he did not have power over me anymore, that I had gone on with my life.
I hope that not only is this an example that justice can be served in America, but that it is possible to move on after something terrible has happened.
Wow. The man convicted of kidnapping Elizabeth Smart will spend the rest of his life in prison.
I was grateful that, he's going to be in prison for the rest of his life.
He would not be out on the streets and be able to hurt another girl or young boy or whatever.
There will be no sentence appropriate for what this guy did.
I want them to know that they're not alone. I want them to know that life can be wonderful and that no matter what's happened, life is still worth living, that you can find happiness again. It may not be easy. In fact, it probably won't be easy, but it'll be worth it.
Elizabeth has had a strength and a desire to see that survivors don't remain victims.
She is the one that says, we will survive. We will fight back. We have worth. She's helped us change laws. She got married to a wonderful guy, and she is the poster girl for survivors.
But you have had the strength and the resilience to make this work your life. How difficult?
Getting married and having a family was something I'd look forward to my whole life. When I was kidnapped, I felt like that was taken away.
I was very concerned about her relating to boys that she wouldn't want to date or go to the school dances, but it never seemed to be a problem because she went to every dance and had lots of friends, and life was good.
I was so truly inspiring story there, guys, of redemption, of hope and faith, and to know that she did not allow that situation, that disgusting, depraved man who stole her innocence in so many different ways, was not able to steal her future and to steal her her inner strength and her inner peace. She was able to go on and actually live a life that was meaningful to her, that was actually somewhat normal for what she had actually been through. You know, she did not let this situation break her, which I think everyone can find some sort of, you know, some sort of inspiration in that, some sort of happiness and joy in her story. To know that this young woman who was 14 when this happened to her can go on to then prosper and still be able to live their life and not let what happened to her define the rest of her life and define who she was. So what do you guys think about this story about Elizabeth Smart? And had you guys heard of this before now? Let me know in the comments your thoughts. And what do you guys think about the woman, Wanda Barzee, being released already? Do y'all think that that is fair? Do y'all think she should have gotten the same sentence as Brian David Mitchell did? Personally, I would say yes, she should have had to spend the rest of her life behind bars, because it is one thing to be a sick man who is led by his sexual desires, no matter how depraved and disgusting it is. You know, we see this sort of thing every day. But to have a woman who is supposed to be nurturing, who is supposed to be motherly, who is supposed to have these womanly instincts to go along with this sort of depraved and disgusting plot to steal this young girl's innocence and to help facilitate it is a different form of evil, I believe. And we've seen this before too in other instances, but it doesn't ever make it any easier to digest that a woman would be capable of doing something like this. So y'all let me know in the comments down below. Please like this video if you guys liked it. And yeah, guys, I would love to know your thoughts on this case. And until next time, I will see you guys later. Okay, bye.
I just tell the truth, and telling the truth is crazy in a world full of lies. If you mix brilliance with bravery, that we can ignite something. Even this conversation alone can ignite the people.
The time is now to express and for people to believe in themselves. The time is now for it to be okay to be great. People in this world shun people for being great, for being a bright color, for standing out. But the time is now to be okay to be the greatest you.